as to what exactly is the sentiment inside South Korea regarding the THAAD system, which we believe in this part of the world as very divisive for the politics in South Korea, and also certainly create some problems between South Korea and China, for example, South Korea and Russia also.
Yes, first and foremost, I have to emphasize the fact that the South Korea is a liberal democracy, which means every different voices, opinions, different views can coexist together. So you might wonder, if you see, for example, public poll results, it looks like a majority of South Korean citizens still do understand the rationale of the THAAD deployment or the reasons why we need it, within the territory. But at the same time, you do see that kind of political turmoil, especially in the local community against Seongju County. I would say it is rather than a kind of huge opposition against the THAAD itself. It was much more about the kind of criticism or skepticism about the decision-making process. Because especially from the Seongju County's people's point of view, the decision was pretty abrupt and pretty unilaterally announced without a kind of pre-consultation with the local community. So I would say, the anger is much more about the procedure rather than, for example, the alliance, ROK-US alliance, or the THAAD itself.
It seemed that you're giving quite an objective view about exactly what's going on. That seemed to be also the various media reports suggest, both from South Korea and from different parts of the world. Mr. Yang, having heard that, China, of course, has a big issue with South Korea about the THAAD system. China does not want it to be deployed in South Korea, with the danger that it could, in a way, have a breach to China's future security, particularly a threat coming from the United States.
Yep.
But what can China do at this moment?
Well, at this moment, almost nothing to do substantively. We hope the THAAD deployment can be brought about, but it's impossible. But I think the consequences of the upcoming deployment will produce profound effects and influences, not only in this region, but also on South Korea. South Korea focus on tactical and political issue on missile threats from the North Korea.
Right.
China look at the issue as a strategic stability, because U.S. want to make THAAD in South Korea as one of the pillars for the regional anti-missile systems that will break the global strategic stabilities among the powers.
Well, Mr. Yang, may I just ask you, by being more specific, because what we are having on the media reports, at least according to the American media, the U.S. Missile Defense Chief visited Seoul recently, and he was suggesting what we are having, suggesting, South Korea and the United States. He said what we are having has nothing to do with global missile defense system, and the U.S. is not to include South Korea into that specific system. That's at least according to the American side. What do you make of it?
Well, I don't trust that.
Why not?
Okay. U.S. on behalf of anti-Iranian missile threats, U.S. has set up an anti-missile system in Europe. And now, U.S. plan to make use of North Korean missile threats to build up a anti-missile system in East Asia. That's the same for both of the global strategy. The NMD, National Missile Defense, is in nature global missile defense.
Okay.
So that is set strategy of the United States. So what we have seen that U.S. has deployed, for example, 3 X-band radar in this region, 2 of them in Japan, and going to be 1 in South Korea.
Right.
And all of the 3 will be part of the systems of radar based of the U.S. anti-missile system.
Let me ask Ms. Lim about this. Ms. Lim, I don't want to drag you into the U.S. missile defense system debate, because it's not South Korea's job, and South Korea cannot make decisions about that. Having said that, though, it seems that your country are dealing with 2 issues at the same time. first of all, some turbulences in domestic politics in Seongju and elsewhere about the process, as you mentioned. Secondly, South Korea is being caught in between two big powers, the United States and China, in each other's mutual suspicion against one another. China certainly is afraid not about South Korea's reactions, but rather about what the US is trying to do through South Korea toward China. So what do you make of these two dilemmas, it seems, that your country and your politics is facing now?
Again, many South Korean IR theorists, international relation theorists, we always thinking about our own survival strategies, especially between this kind of rivalry, not only just China, between the continental powers and the Pacific powers represented by the United States. Whenever these two powers collide or compete, I mean, it has been always a kind of challenge to us rather than an opportunity. So this missile defense system, it is controversial because of that kind of concerns, as just Mr. Young mentioned. But from our point of view, again, this THAAD, for example, it is only for just, it should be supposed to be against the, or for the deterrence vis-a-vis the North Korea's missile system together with the nuclear program. Except that, I mean, there is no other reason for us, I mean, to deploy that kind of device, I mean, within our territory. And again, today it was the National Liberation Day, I mean, for us, and we have been proud of our own autonomous kind of strategy for our foreign policy. So, which means I hope, I mean, that this alliance relationship can be based on that kind of mutual understanding or more equal status between the United States and the Republic of Korea.
Interestingly said, Ms. Lim, because that allies relationship used to be the guarantee for South Korea to maintain peace and stability in the region. But will they continue to be so given the geopolitical changes in the region? That's an interesting question mark. Having said that, though, if we recall the days when President Park took first of all in the office back in the year 2013, she vowed to lay the groundwork for an era of harmonious unification through a trust-building process on the Korean Peninsula. She also came out with the so-called Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative to solve the Asian paradox. Now we are, Ms. Lim, only a few months before she disappears from the office, namely she's coming to the end of her term. How much have we seen her achieve some of her previous plans? And meanwhile, after all of this diplomacies with China, interactions with the United States, are things getting better for South Korea? In other words, how can we see her term dealing with the most thorny issue of the region and also for South Korea's own existence?
Yeah, in theory, you highlighted the trust politic and the NAPSI, the idea for the NAPSI, Northeast Asia Economic Cooperation Initiative. And together with the Eurasia Initiative, the three actually compose of the tripod of the Park Geun-hye administration's diplomacy. In theory, again, these three pillars are not supposed to entangle one in another, but in the reality, as long as, again, the North Korea doesn't stop provoking not only just us, I mean, to many others as well, with the nuclear and the missile tests. I mean, the other actually two, NAPSI and the Eurasia Initiative, also were almost like blocked or negatively influenced. That was the reality. So I feel very frustrated or sometimes disappointed about that too, because even though the international circumstances is almost like the toughest ever, but at the same time, I also wanted to see a more kind of strategic flexibility or like a strategic complexity of this specific administrations. But you're right, I mean, it's only like a one end, almost like a half half year left, and there are many uncertainties. For example, this year, our ally, the United States, they're going to have the presidential election, and it's going to be a huge, actually, a variable to our own foreign policy as well. So, but still, one thing I really have to highlight is I really want to see, I don't want to see a kind of disconnection of communication among us, especially between the China and Korea and the United States as well. So I think the G20, you previously reported about that. So the G20, I hope G20 can provide a good opportunity for that kind of, discussion as well.
We hope that will be a great discussion format and platform, but it's only for communication. The question is whether strategically the countries believe so that they can work together. Mr. Yang, therefore, I want to come back to you about that. First of all, your brief comments about the intentions seem to be all agreed that South Korea is doing it for its own security's sake, but the result, will it necessarily match the intention and the expectation, is one big question mark. I want you to respond from this first, and then I'll have some other questions for you as well.
Let me put it by this way. On one hand, there are indeed threats, massive threats from North against the South. And for dealing with the threats, there are several options. And unfortunately, Park administration make the worst choice. For example,
from China's perspective.
Yeah, a few years ago, South Korean politicians and policymakers seriously discussed the issue of introducing iron drone system from Israel for protect South Korea from
another option.
Yeah. That's that option. And then I don't understand why they set aside this idea and then suddenly turn to the THAAD. And in my observation, Mr. Lim was correct. The ruling party had much more consultations and discussions with the United States than the consultations with the opposition parties
and other, or local politics.
So I really doubt that is the Americans' strong influences on the South Korean policy making that lead to a worst option.
Okay, that is your observation, but what about from the China side? South Korea has been saying, well, how much China, you can help us with the security guarantee. The US does, at least with some options. So what can China do with us? That's the one question they asked. That's one question. And the other question is, what is likely for you, Mr. Yang, the future prospect of the Korean Peninsula issue? Because we see the six-party camp have been very much divided on this issue and by this issue alone. So can we see them still have the momentum and the institutional, in a way, willingness to work together at all? And what would that mean for the Korean Peninsula?
Well, for the first question, answer is very simple. Because the decision has been made about THAAD, so China has to do something unilateral by our own national interests. For second question, I think the games will last in a very complicated courses in the interactions between China, US, and China, South Korea. And the bad thing, the good thing is the top leaders will make use of the G20 as a good opportunity. But I don't think the bad thing is, I don't think the one-time summit between Park and Xi or Xi and Obama can solve this strategic complicated issue.